Chapter 1. The Forgotten Notebook. That morning, she'd been reviewing supply routes in the war room's archives, hidden away while the fortress slept through the pre-dawn hours. She never imagined anyone would enter at that hour, much less the General Commander himself. In her panic to leave unseen, she'd made the worst mistake possible, abandoning the notebook where she'd documented everything. Every discrepancy, every suspicious pattern, and worst of all, every traitorous thought about the commander being devastatingly, impossibly attractive. Now, 3 days later, Sera pressed herself against the cold stone wall of the corridor, heart hammering as heavy boots approached. She'd been avoiding him, hiding in plain sight among the fortress staff, uncertain whether he'd found her notebook or whether her paranoia was simply eating her alive. The oil lamp cast wavering shadows across the wooden desk where Sera had been working. She dipped her pen into the inkwell, hesitated only a moment, then began writing with the contained fury of someone carrying too many burdens alone. Another masterclass in how to hollow out a military from within, presented by Vice Commander Aldrich, the loyal mentor. Her handwriting grew sharper, the pen pressing hard enough to nearly tear the paper. Her jaw ached from clenching as she wrote, because this notebook was her only weapon, the brutal truth no one else seemed willing or able to see. I intercepted a communication suggesting the northern outpost needs temporary reallocation of rations to reinforce supply lines. Our beloved commander frowned. Will he finally question it today? Will he ask why those reinforced supply lines still use the same decaying wagons from 3 years ago? Sera closed her eyes, seeing the scene from earlier that day with perfect clarity. She'd been cataloging medical supplies in the adjacent room, door cracked open, watching General Commander Kael and his vice commander discuss logistics. She'd seen Kael's expression, that moment of doubt before capitulation. He always capitulated. She continued writing, sarcasm dripping from every word. The answer, no. From the defeated look when they left the room, he gave in again. How is it possible to be so blind? The man has enhanced tactical vision that can track enemy movements across miles, yet he cannot see the traitor standing directly beside him. Sera took a shaky breath, trying to contain the frustration burning in her chest like hot coals. She'd always been like this, unable to pretend she didn't notice, incapable of accepting things as they were. Since she'd arrived at the fortress as a child following her mother's military posting, she'd developed this infuriating habit of observing, questioning, documenting everything. Her mother, a decorated logistics officer before her death in border conflicts, had always warned her, "Sera, you can't wander into restricted areas. It's not safe. It's not appropriate for a civilian." But Sera had been stubborn. She'd kept visiting the supply depots where workers grumbled about shipments that never materialized, the training yards where soldiers muttered about promised equipment that vanished, and especially the border villages where she'd volunteered in medical tents, earning trust from people who would never trust fortress officials. Because Sera wasn't military. She was merely a dead officer's daughter, raised by an aunt who worked in the fortress kitchens, educated through military charity programs but never truly belonging to that world. She'd grown up free in the fortress corridors without the rigid discipline that constrained soldiers, and perhaps that was exactly what made her so observant. She saw the military through the eyes of someone who existed on its edges. The man practically has gold embroidered on his uniform collar. He smiles when discussing necessary sacrifices, as if planning a feast, not condemning entire villages to shortages. Sera remembered Mistress Kenna, whom she'd met in the border village 2 days ago. The elderly healer, with her weathered face and herb-stained hands, had said in a weary voice, "The promised medical supplies vanished, girl. Simply disappeared. Today in the village, Mistress Kenna told me the promised medical supplies evaporated. Meanwhile, I saw 4 wagons leaving Aldrich's private warehouses. Full. Destination. What a mystery." Her hands trembled slightly as she wrote, not from fear, but from helpless rage. Because who was she to accuse anyone? Who would believe a civilian dependent over the vice commander, the general's trusted mentor? Sometimes I want to shake Kael and shout, "Wake up." But who am I? Just Sera. Just the charity case. The girl with a dead mother, no rank, no voice. She sighed and turned the page. Then, as always happened when she let her guard down, her thoughts drifted into dangerous territory. She began writing more slowly, the words heavy with shameful confession. I saw the commander training today, both in human form and transformed. Her face flushed instantly. She shouldn't have been there. Command-level training wasn't open to observers. It took place in a secured courtyard, warded and guarded. But Sera knew every forgotten passage in the fortress, every overlooked window, every hidden vantage point. She'd found a spot in an abandoned guard tower where she could watch unseen, hidden behind crumbling crenellations overgrown with ivy. In human form, his impressive, she wrote, biting her lip. Tall, broad-shouldered, powerful arms moving with precision through combat forms. His chest is, gods, how embarrassing to write this, perfectly defined, visible through the training shirt that clings to him with sweat. She closed her eyes, and the image rose vivid in her mind. Kael training beneath the morning sun, abdominal muscles contracting with every strike, sweat trailing down his neck, the way he moved with that lethal grace only true tactical commanders possessed, power and absolute control in every gesture. Then he transformed. Sera felt a shiver run down her spine just remembering. And then he shifted. The transformation is, I have no words. His body contorts, expands, and within seconds there's a massive silver wolf where the man stood. A true alpha wolf, silver-white like polished steel, larger than any normal wolf, amber eyes gleaming with intelligence and predatory focus even in animal form. She remembered holding her breath at that moment, hands gripping the cold stone to steady herself, because the sight was terrifying and mesmerizing simultaneously. Watching a man become a beast, watching the creature emerge without losing the essence of who he was. He trained as a wolf for nearly an hour. The strength, the speed, the brutal precision, it's terrifying and magnificent at once. Sera stopped writing. Her hands trembled again, but now for entirely different reasons, because she had to confess the most shameful part, the part that haunted her during sleepless nights. She took a deep breath and continued. When he finished, he transformed back and I should have looked away. I should have left. But I was frozen. Heat rose up her neck, staining her cheeks. But she had to write it, had to release this confession devouring her from within. After the transformation, his naked. Completely. Her heart raced just remembering. I saw an aide rush forward with a cloak to cover him. But for a few seconds that felt like eternity, I saw everything. The broad, muscular back still slick with sweat. The line of his spine, powerful legs, everything. Sera squeezed her eyes shut, shame burning in her chest like fire, because she'd stayed there, hidden, watching something she had no right to see, memoizing every detail like a thief stealing something precious. The aide wrapped the cloak around him, and I finally managed to breathe. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking. I slipped away before anyone discovered me watching something I shouldn't have. She stopped, breathed, continued in smaller letters, almost ashamed. But the image, his image, is burned into my mind. How can he be so passive and manipulated when sitting in strategy meetings, yet be irresistibly beautiful as both man and wolf, clothed and... She stopped, breathed again. Stop, Sera. Just stop. But she couldn't stop, because there was something worse than physical desire. Something deeper and more frightening. I'm an idiot. A complete idiot. I stood there like a fool watching every muscle during the transformation, every detail I should never have seen, imagining things I shouldn't. And then the most dangerous confession of all. And when he transforms into a wolf, something in me, my own wolf, wants to approach, wants to touch that silver fur, wants to run beside him. Sera clenched the pen so tightly she nearly snapped it, because that was the worst part, the most humiliating, most infuriating truth. Her inner wolf, that instinctive animal part all shifters possessed, reacted to Kael in ways she couldn't control. Whenever she saw him from afar, even when her rational mind harshly criticized him as weak and easily manipulated, her wolf whimpered softly with strange restlessness, a desire to draw closer, to run beside that immense silver wolf. And she hated it. Hated that her body betrayed her mind. Hated that something so primitive within her recognized something in him that her reason refused to accept. It's infuriating. I despise him mentally, but my wolf won't stop howling for him. Stop it, Sera. He's the General Commander. He would never notice someone like you. And if he discovered you spy on him like this, you'd be expelled from the fortress. Or worse. She turned the page violently, as if she could turn her tangled thoughts with it. Then she wrote her most secret fantasy, the one that visited her during lonely nights. If I were his second in command, I would do things differently. The words flowed more softly now, heavy with melancholy. I would investigate the discrepancies personally. I would listen to the border communities. I would not let men like Aldrich manipulate every strategic decision. I would use all that strength he wastes in training to truly protect our territories, not just look impressive while fighting. Sera stopped, staring at what she'd written. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. If I was second in command. As if that were possible. As if a girl without rank, without lineage, with nothing but sharp observations and foolish dreams could ever hold command. She closed the notebook with a weary sigh, tucking it beneath her shirt before extinguishing the lamp. The archives sank into darkness, lit only by the grey pre-dawn light filtering through high windows. Time to return to her modest quarters in the civilian wing. Time to lock away these dangerous confessions and go back to being just Sera. The charity case, the invisible young woman wandering the fortress, seeing things no one else saw. She was nearly at the door when she heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, measured, approaching. Sera's heart leapt into her throat. Damn it. No one was supposed to be in the archives at this hour. She always came before dawn precisely to avoid encounters. She looked around desperately for an exit, a hiding place, anything. Too late. The door opened. And there, filling the doorway completely, stood him. Kael, the General Commander himself. Chapter 2. The Silver Wolf. Sera felt as if the ground had vanished beneath her feet. He was even more imposing up close. Tall. So tall she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. Broad shoulders blocking the corridor light, casting an almost intimidating silhouette. His presence filled the space, drawing the air from it, making the archives suddenly feel smaller. His eyes, amber in the dim light though she knew they could flare golden at any moment, found her immediately. Surprise crossed his face. I didn't expect to find anyone here, he said, his deep voice reverberating off the silent walls. Sera froze. Her inner wolf stirred instantly, that familiar restlessness crawling up her spine. No, not now. Please, not now. But her body wouldn't obey. She felt her heart pounding violently against her ribs. Her hands, still clutching the notebook, began to sweat. Her legs felt like water. And worse, much worse, her wolf was practically singing inside her. Recognition, attraction, that silent howl she always fought to ignore now echoing through her chest with renewed force because he was there, only steps away, so close she could smell him. Pine smoke, leather, and something wilder, more primal. Alpha scent. Her voice came out hoarse, barely a whisper. She cleared her throat. Commander, I was just researching. Why did her voice have to tremble like that? Why were her legs unsteady? Get a grip, Sera. He's just a man. A passive, manipulated man you despise completely. But her wolf disagreed. Her wolf wanted to step closer. Wanted to. Stop. Kael tilted his head slightly, studying her with those keen eyes, and Sera realized with rising horror that he could likely hear her racing heartbeat, smell her nervousness in her sweat. A wolf's enhanced senses missed nothing, especially not an alpha's. At this hour, he asked, taking a step into the archives. Sera retreated instinctively, not from fear. It had never been fear, but because his proximity made her body react in ways her mind wholly disapproved of. She managed, forcing steadiness into her voice. When it's quiet. He stopped, seeming to realize he was intimidating her. His expression softened slightly. For a moment, there was only silence between them. Heavy, charged with something Sera couldn't name. And then Kael did something unexpected. He smiled, small, almost imperceptible, but genuine. So do I, he said simply. I haven't slept properly in weeks. I thought walking through the fortress might help. I saw the lamp light, and... He hesitated, running a hand through his dark hair in a gesture that looked tired. I'm sorry if I startled you. Sera blinked. He's apologizing. The commander is apologizing to me. Something tightened in her chest because he looked different. Not the distant commander she saw from afar, always surrounded by advisors, always wearing that mask of controlled authority. But just a man, tired, worried, vulnerable. And that was dangerous, because it was easier to despise him when he was merely a distant figure. Much harder when he was standing there, so close, so real. You didn't startle me, she lied, still pressing the notebook to her chest. I simply didn't expect to see anyone. What were you researching? He asked, moving toward the shelves with measured steps, as if trying not to frighten her further. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Just old campaign records, she improvised quickly. About the first territorial expansions. Nothing very interesting. Kael picked up a random scroll, unrolling it without really reading. He seemed nervous. No, not nervous, but definitely uncomfortable. You like military history. I like understanding how things work, Sera answered honestly. Why things happened the way they did. Sometimes the past explains the present. He looked at her then, truly looked at her, and Sera felt the weight of his gaze like something physical, as if he were trying to decipher something within her. A wise observation, he said softly. Silence fell again, but this time it was different. Less tense, more comfortable. Almost. Kael sighed and leaned against the shelf. Pre-dawn light cut across his face at sharp angles, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, his full lips. Sera forced herself to look away. I haven't slept in 5 nights, he confessed suddenly, his voice heavy with weariness that felt more emotional than physical. The territories, there are things happening that I can't fully understand. Sera watched him, surprised by his honesty. Commanders didn't confess weakness, especially not to someone like her. My vice commander, Kael continued, looking down at his own hands as if searching for answers there. Aldrich has been my closest advisor since my father was killed in combat. But lately, something feels wrong. He makes decisions, influences things, acts as if, he stopped, jaw tightening, as if he were the commander. Finally, Sera had to bite her tongue to keep from saying it aloud. Finally, you're seeing it. But she remained silent, letting him continue. Sometimes I think I'm losing my mind. Kael laughed without humor. Questioning the one man who's always been there, who helped me lead when I was too young to know what I was doing. He lifted his eyes to meet hers, and Sera saw something there that surprised her. Doubt, confusion, and perhaps fear. But you feel that something is wrong, she finished softly. He nodded, seeming relieved that someone understood. Yes, exactly. And then, before Sera could process what she was doing, the words slipped out. Trust that feeling. Kael stared at her. What? Your instincts, she said, choosing her words carefully. Alphas have them for a reason. If something feels wrong, it probably is. She could see the struggle on his face, the desire to believe her warring with years of manipulation, years of blindly trusting Aldrich. It's complicated, he said at last. It always is, Sera replied. They held each other's gaze for a long moment, and something passed between them, a silent understanding, a connection Sera couldn't explain but could feel pulsing in the air like a living thing. That was when it happened. Kael took a step toward her, and the breeze from the open window carried Sera's scent straight to him. Wild lavender, sweet but sharp, and something deeper, something unique, intoxicating, entirely hers. Kael stopped short, his eyes widening slightly. Sera saw him inhale more deeply, almost unconsciously, as if that scent had hooked something inside him. And then she saw it. His eyes flared, for just a second, perhaps less, but she saw it. Golden, intense, wild. His wolf stirred. Kael shut his eyes tightly, jaw tensing. When he opened them again, they were normal, amber, controlled. But Sera had seen it, and her own wolf answered. A silent howl of recognition echoed in her chest, sending her heart racing even faster. No, 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 no. Kael cleared his throat, looking genuinely confused. I should go. But he didn't move. He stood there watching her as if trying to solve an impossible riddle. Panic rose in Sera's chest because he was feeling it. She could see it in the way he studied her, in the tension in his shoulders, in the way his hands clenched into fists as if fighting some impulse. He's feeling the same thing I am. Or something close to it. What is your name? He asked suddenly. Sera, she answered automatically, still processing what had just happened. Sera, he repeated, as if testing the name on his tongue. And gods, the way he said it, low, rough, almost intimate, made something twist in her stomach. Daughter of Officer Marin, she added quickly, reminding him of the distance between them. I grew up here in the fortress. Kael nodded slowly, but his eyes never left her, as if he were memoizing every detail. The curve of her face, the color of her eyes, the way her hair fell over her shoulders. I should return to my quarters, Sera said, taking a step back. She needed to leave, needed distance before she did something foolish, like admitting she'd watched him naked, or that her wolf was practically begging to go to him. Of course, Kael agreed, though there was reluctance in his voice. Forgive the intrusion. Sera nodded and walked quickly toward the door. She had to pass him. The space was too narrow to avoid it. And when she did, so close she nearly brushed his arm, the scent of pine smoke and leather enveloped her completely. Her wolf howled, loud, insistent. "Be quiet," she ordered mentally with all the strength she had. "Good morning, Commander," she said without looking back, quickening her pace. "Good morning, Sera." The way he said her name again, laden with something she couldn't identify, made her want to run. And that was exactly what she did as soon as she turned the corner. Kael remained standing in the archives for long minutes after she left. His heart still hammered unevenly, his hands still trembled faintly. What was that? His wolf was restless, not in the furious way of sensing a threat, not in the excited way of a hunt, but something entirely different. Something he'd never felt before. An intense unease, a magnetic pull, an insistent, curious whisper. "Huh, pay attention to her. There is something important about her." Kael ran a hand over his face, confused. Why her? Why now? He'd never noticed Sera before, and he was certain that if he'd ever seen that beautiful young woman wandering the fortress, he would have remembered. But his wolf had recognized her somehow. It wasn't the absolute certainty of a confirmed bond, not that instinctive roar of "my mate" the stories described. It was subtler, more confusing. A powerful attraction, yes, but also a consuming curiosity. A need to know more, to understand what that strange feeling was that had seized him the moment her scent reached him. Wild lavender. He would never forget that scent. Kael was about to leave when his boot brushed against something on the floor. He bent down and picked it up. A notebook, small, with a worn leather cover. And there, almost imperceptibly small in the corner, written in delicate script, Sera. She'd forgotten it. Kael locked the door to his chambers carefully, the muted sound echoing through the heavy silence of early morning. He lit candles around the desk, creating circles of golden light that barely managed to pierce the darkness of the room. The notebook rested in his hands, small, worn. It shouldn't have been there. The voice of conscience rang clearly in his mind. This is a violation of someone's trust. Wrong on every possible level. But that impulse, that need hammering relentlessly ever since her scent had reached him, ever since his wolf had awakened in that consuming way, wouldn't leave him alone. Learn more about her. Understand. She is important. Kael took a deep breath and opened the first page. The handwriting was delicate yet firm, the letters shaped with evident care. He began to read. Another masterclass in how to hollow out a military from within, presented by Vice Commander Aldrich, the loyal mentor. Kael frowned immediately. The tone was sarcastic, sharp, almost cruel in its honesty. He continued, his eyes devouring the words. "I intercepted a communication suggesting the northern outpost needs temporary reallocation of rations to reinforce supply lines." Our beloved commander frowned. Will he finally question it today? He remembered that conversation perfectly. It had been exactly that day in the strategy room. Aldrich had presented the figures, the seemingly solid justifications. And yes, Kael had frowned, questioning inwardly. But how did she know? From where had she observed? The answer, no. From the defeated look when they left, he gave in again. The words struck him like physical blows. Defeated. Was that what his expression looked like? How is it possible to be so blind? The man has enhanced tactical vision that can track enemy movements across miles, yet he cannot see the traitor standing directly beside him. Traitor. Kael stopped, read the word again, then read it once more. She hadn't used questionable advisor or concerning influence. She hadn't softened it with military euphemisms. Traitor. Direct, brutal, unfiltered. His chest tightened because deep down, in places he didn't admit even to himself, he knew. He'd always known. But it was easier to ignore. Easier to trust blindly. Easier to be the puppet commander who... Puppet. Was that what she thought of him? He kept reading, almost afraid of what he would find. Aldrich practically has gold embroidered on his uniform collar. The man smiles when discussing necessary sacrifices, as if planning a feast, not condemning entire villages to shortages. Kael tried to remember. Did Aldrich smile during those discussions? Did he really smile? And he realized with growing discomfort that yes, he did. He always had that satisfied expression, that gleam in his eyes when they rearranged resources. How had he never noticed what that truly meant? He turned the page with fingers that trembled slightly. Today in the village, Mistress Kenna told me the promised medical supplies vanished. Evaporated. Meanwhile, I saw 4 wagons leaving Aldrich's private warehouses. Full. Destination. What a mystery. The air left Kael's lungs as if he'd been punched. Medical supplies. Villages. Wagons. Aldrich's warehouses. These weren't vague accusations. They were specific, concrete, with names of real people and exact locations. He'd approved the shipment of medical supplies to the border villages 2 weeks earlier, generous quantities to help with an outbreak. Aldrich had personally supervised the distribution, assuring him everything would be delivered properly. If the supplies hadn't arrived, if they were being diverted. How long has this been happening? The question echoed in his mind, bringing with it a wave of nausea. Chapter 3. Secrets Revealed. How many other distributions had Aldrich overseen? How many resources had vanished right under his nose? Sometimes I want to shake Kael and scream, "Wake up." But who am I? Just Sera. Kael closed his eyes for a moment, something aching deeply in his chest. Just Sera. As if she had no worth. As if her brilliant observations, her sharp intelligence, her courage to see what no one else saw or refused to see meant nothing. She had seen everything, written it all down. Alone, without power, without a voice, she had done the work that he, the commander, should have done. P.S. Aldrich was wearing a new insignia pin. Solid platinum with sapphires. Remarkable thrift for a vice commander on standard salary. Kael remembered the pin, large, ostentatious, impossible to ignore. Aldrich had said it was a family heirloom, a treasure kept for generations that he'd finally decided to wear. But if he'd bought it with diverted funds? Anger began to simmer slowly in Kael's veins. Not the hot explosion of rage, but something colder, deadlier, controlled. He kept turning pages, absorbing every word as if it were water in the desert. Detailed conversations Sera had had in the villages. Names of people who trusted her with their complaints. Precise records of promised supplies that never arrived. Equipment that disappeared. Money that evaporated. Dates, locations, testimonies. She had assembled, without realizing it, a complete case against Aldrich. Evidence Kael should use. But then the handwriting changed. It became more hurried, the letters less careful, nervous, as if written in haste or under uncontrolled emotion. Kael turned the page, his heart accelerating without knowing why. I saw the commander training today, both in human form and transformed. Everything inside him stopped completely. His heart, his breathing. Even his wolf went utterly still. She watched me. Secretly. I shouldn't have been there. Command-level training isn't open to observers. But I found a hidden place from which I can watch without being seen. Kael should have felt invaded, violated somehow. The training sessions were private, precisely to avoid prying eyes, judgment, vulnerability. But all he felt was that strange warmth spreading through his chest. She watches me. Why did that matter so much? He forced himself to keep reading, even knowing he should stop, that he was crossing a line he couldn't undo. In human form, his impressive. Kael's face heated instantly. He could feel the warmth climbing up his neck, coloring his cheeks. Stop. Close the notebook now. But his eyes were already on the next line. Tall, broad shoulders, powerful arms moving with precision through combat forms. His chest is, gods, how embarrassing to write this, perfectly defined, visible through the training shirt that clings to him with sweat. His wolf rumbled softly. Not a threat, something entirely different. A deep, primal satisfaction. She notices. She pays attention. She sees me. Without realizing it, he was already smiling. Kael couldn't stop reading now. It was like being under a spell. A true alpha wolf, silver-white like polished steel, larger than any normal wolf. Amber eyes gleaming with intelligence and predatory focus even in animal form. Something in his chest expanded as he read those words. The way she described him with admiration mixed with something that felt almost like reverence. He trained as a wolf for nearly an hour. The strength, the speed, the brutal precision, it's terrifying and magnificent at once. Kael turned the page, his hands now visibly shaking, and stopped. The next entry began differently. The words were more spaced out, hesitant, as if she'd struggled with herself over whether to write or not. When he finished, he transformed back and I should have looked away. I should have left. But I was frozen. His heart began to pound violently. He knew what was coming. After the transformation, his naked. Completely. Kael squeezed his eyes shut, trying to process it. She had been there, hidden, watching. And she had seen. He opened his eyes, continued, unable to stop even though he wanted to. I saw an aide rush forward with a cloak to cover him, but for a few seconds, seconds that felt like eternity, I could see. His breathing was rapid now, uneven. The room felt hotter, the air heavier. He should have felt violated, invaded, furious perhaps. But all he felt was that consuming heat, that growing need to know exactly what she had thought, how she had reacted, what she had felt seeing him like that, completely exposed, vulnerable. His entire body. The broad, muscular back still slick with sweat. The line of his spine, powerful legs, everything. Every inch of tanned skin, every defined muscle, the battle scars telling stories I'll never know. Kael unconsciously ran his fingers over the wide scar on his left shoulder, the largest one, from a border skirmish 4 years earlier against raiders. She had noticed, even the scars. She had paid attention to every detail. The aide wrapped the cloak around him, and I finally managed to breathe. My heart was racing. My hands were shaking. He could picture it perfectly now. Sera hidden somewhere above, watching, heart racing, hands trembling, struggling to control her breathing. Exactly as she had been in the archives when he approached her. I slipped away before anyone discovered me watching something I shouldn't. But the image of him, is burned into my mind. Burned into her mind, just as the image of her, nervous, beautiful, dark eyes meeting his without retreat, was burned into his. Kael turned the page, completely lost now. He had forgotten he was invading privacy, forgotten that he should stop. He could only read, absorb, feel. How can he be so passive and manipulated when sitting in strategy meetings, yet be irresistibly beautiful as both man and wolf, clothed and passive, manipulated? The words should have hurt, should have offended, provoked anger. But he couldn't bring himself to care because she had also called him something else. Irresistibly beautiful. Not handsome, not attractive. Irresistible. As if she couldn't help it. As if she had fought it and lost. Stop, Sera. Just stop. Kael could feel her struggle in those short words. The war between desire and reason. Between what she felt and what she believed she should feel. Exactly as he had fought in the archives. Exactly as he was fighting now. He turned the page with fingers that could barely hold the notebook. I'm an idiot. A complete idiot. No, Kael thought with an intensity that surprised him. You're not. You never were. I stood there like a fool watching every muscle during the transformation. Every detail I should never have seen. Imagining things I shouldn't. The air caught in his lungs. Imagining things. The heat that surged through his body was so intense that Kael had to lean back in the chair, closing his eyes for a moment. She imagined things. With him. His wolf growled, low, possessive, fully awake now. Mine, the wolf whispered with growing conviction. She thinks of me, desires me. She is mine. Kael opened his eyes, breathing deeply to control his body's reaction, but it was useless. Every word made her more real, more present, more necessary. He forced himself to continue, even knowing that every line pulled him deeper. And when he transforms into a wolf, something in me, my own wolf, wants to approach, wants to touch that silver fur, wants to run beside him. Everything stopped completely. The world, time, his breath. Kael reread the line, then reread it again and again. My own wolf. Her wolf wanted to approach, to touch, to run beside his. This is it. This is exactly what my wolf feels for her. Understanding struck him like lightning, because it was precisely what his wolf had felt when he smelled her in the archives. That consuming need to draw closer, to protect, to keep near, to run together beneath the moon. We both feel it. Both wolves recognize something. But she was fighting it too. It's infuriating. The entry continued, the words almost angry. I despise him mentally, but my wolf won't stop howling for him. Kael almost laughed, a sound without real humor, but full of profound understanding, because it was exactly what was happening to him now. His rational mind tried to say she was just a civilian dependent, no one of important military lineage, no one the command council would accept, no one who should matter this much. But his wolf disagreed violently, completely. Stop, Sera. He's the commander. He would never notice someone like you. And if he discovered you spy on him like this, you'd be expelled from the fortress. Or worse. Pain, real pain, pierced Kael's chest as he read that. He would never notice someone like you. She truly believed that. That she was invisible, that she didn't deserve attention, that he, a man who'd spent years rejecting the most accomplished officers' daughters without feeling anything, would never see her. But he already did. Gods, how he saw her. There was one more entry. Kael turned the page, almost afraid of what he would find. If I were second in command, I would do things differently. His heart stopped completely. If I were second in command, I would investigate the discrepancies personally. I would listen to the border communities. I would not let men like Aldrich manipulate every strategic decision. She would be a better second in command than he was a commander. The truth was crystalline, undeniable. I would use all that strength he wastes in training to truly protect our territories, not just look impressive while fighting. Wasted strength. The words cut deep because they were brutal, inescapable truth. He trained every day, kept himself strong, fast, lethal. But for what? To impress at occasional demonstrations? To maintain appearances of power? When was the last time he'd truly used that strength to protect someone? To defend something beyond his own pride? Kael closed the notebook with excessive care, his hands visibly trembling. He sat in absolute silence for long minutes, perhaps hours. He no longer knew, simply holding the small notebook as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Because it was. That notebook hadn't only revealed secrets. It had revealed an extraordinary woman, intelligent enough to see what the entire polished command ignored or pretended not to see, brave enough to record dangerous truths that could destroy her if discovered, passionately devoted to the territories in a visceral, real way he'd never seen in any officer of pure military lineage, and who, despite criticizing him with deserved brutality, also desired him, fought against the same inexplicable recognition he felt. Kael rose slowly, walking to the window with uncertain steps. The sun was rising, bathing the fortress in cold, silvery light. His wolf was no longer merely restless or curious. It was convinced, more certain with every passing second. It wasn't yet the absolute certainty of a fully confirmed soul bond, the instant and unshakable recognition described in the ancient stories. But it was the beginning of something inevitable. Something his wolf recognized even as his mind still struggled to process it fully. And now he had more than inexplicable, consuming attraction. He had real information, concrete evidence about Aldrich, about systematic embezzlement, calculated manipulation, treason unfolding right beneath his nose. Sera had not only awakened his heart, she had opened his eyes. Chapter 4, The Search. Sera had not slept at all. She'd spent the entire night tossing in the narrow bed, panic growing with every torturous hour that passed without answers. The notebook. Where did I drop it? When? When the sun finally rose, bringing light but no relief, she got up with deep dark circles under her eyes and hands trembling uncontrollably. She needed to return to the archives, search again more carefully. Perhaps it had fallen behind some tall shelf. Perhaps it was hidden in some shadow she hadn't checked properly in the panic of the morning before. Please let it still be there. She dressed in haste with clumsy fingers, nearly tearing the fabric of her simple dress. She practically ran through the still empty corridors of the fortress. It was too early for most to be awake, perfect to turn the archives upside down without witnesses. She entered the silent room. The familiar scent of old parchment and dust greeted her as always, but this time it brought no comfort. She began to search under every table, behind every shelf, among forgotten cushions. Every possible and impossible corner. Nothing. No. Her hands shook violently as she searched the same place for the third, fourth, fifth time, as if the notebook might magically appear through sheer force of will. Everything I wrote about the territories, about Aldrich being a traitor, about the commander, about watching him train, about seeing him naked after the transformation, about my wolf howling for him, about imagining things that. The shame burned so fiercely that Sera had to sit down, her legs simply giving out. If someone read it, if it fell into the wrong hands, if Aldrich discovered the accusations, if the commander read the parts about, I am completely ruined. She buried her face in her hands, trying to breathe, trying to think, trying to find some impossible solution. Maybe no one would find it. Maybe it had fallen into some dark crevice no one would ever search. Maybe. Sera remained there, lost in spiraling thoughts, almost crying. Kael woke that morning, after spending the entire night reading Sera's notebook, with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. Perhaps he'd never felt it at all. The haze Aldrich had so carefully kept over his eyes had lifted, replaced by crystal-clear sight and controlled fury. He hid the notebook in a secret compartment in his chambers, behind a wooden panel only he knew how to open. Then he dressed, straightened his uniform, and went out to be the commander he had always been meant to be. But he was not the same commander anymore. In the corridors, he greeted officers with the same professionalism as always. In the strategy room, He listened to reports with seemingly detached attention. In command meetings, he nodded at Aldrich with a neutral expression, the perfect mask. But underneath it, he worked. On the first day, he discreetly summoned a loyal scout who had served his own father for decades. A man he could trust absolutely. "I need you to do something for me," Kael had said in a low voice, far from prying ears. "Go to the border villages quietly. Find a woman named Kenna. She's a healer. Ask about the medical supplies promised 2 weeks ago. Write down everything she says. And watch the wagons leaving private warehouses." The man didn't question him. He simply nodded and left before midday. On the second day, Kael sent another trusted scout, a woman old enough to be nearing retirement, owing favors to no one, to trace supply records, distribution documents, compare what had been approved with what had actually reached its destinations. Look for discrepancies, he had instructed. Account for every resource that doesn't add up. And while his scouts worked in the shadows, Kael began to change his behavior toward Aldrich. Subtly, not dramatically. That would alert his vice commander immediately. But in small ways. When Aldrich suggested something, Kael hesitated one heartbeat longer before agreeing. He asked more specific questions. Why exactly do we need to reallocate these rations? Show me the distribution records. He looked more closely. He paid attention to details he had always ignored. And he watched his vice commander, truly watched him, for the first time. He saw the gleam in Aldrich's eyes when they discussed resource restructuring. He saw that satisfied smile Sera had described. He saw the way his vice commander moved through the fortress with authority he shouldn't have, issuing orders that weren't his to give. How did I never see this before? The answer was simple and shameful, because he hadn't wanted to see. Because it was easier to trust blindly. Because Aldrich had always been there, filling the void his father's death in combat had left behind. But now he saw. And what he saw sickened him. Aldrich was no fool. Decades of manipulating people had taught him to read subtle signals, nearly imperceptible shifts in behavior. And he was seeing those shifts in Kael. On the second day, sitting in his private quarters, Aldrich drummed his fingers on the imported wooden desk, bought with stolen resources his naive commander had never questioned. Something changed. Kael was different. More alert, less pliable. Asking questions he'd never asked before. Is he investigating me? Paranoia, the old companion of anyone who lives by betrayal, began to whisper. Impossible. He's too weak, too controlled. Years of building him into that. But the doubt remained, persistent, corrosive. On the third day, Aldrich made a decision. He summoned 3 staff members he knew were flexible with their loyalties. He offered heavy silver coins. Find out what the commander has been doing, he ordered in a soft, dangerous voice. Who he speaks to, what he does, where he goes. Everything. And to one particular staff member, a small, discreet man who worked in the command wing, he gave an even more specific order. Search his quarters. Look for anything unusual. Documents, letters, anything. The man nodded, his eyes shining with greed. Sera was losing her mind. 3 days. 72 hours. 4,320 minutes of absolute, growing panic. She had gone back to the archives 6 times on the first day, 8 on the second. Now on the third, she had lost count of how many times she'd entered that cursed room to tear through the same places. It has to be here. It has to be. But it wasn't. She had checked under every table at least 20 times, behind every shelf until her hands were raw, between every cushion until she'd memorized every tear in the old fabric. Nothing. Someone took it. Someone read it. Someone knows. Nights were worse. She lay in the narrow bed, staring at the dark ceiling, imagining increasingly horrible scenarios. Aldrich reading the accusations and having her arrested for conspiracy. The commander reading the humiliating parts and laughing at her with the officers. Her aunt being punished for raising such a reckless niece. Being thrown out of the fortress with nothing. Or worse, she could barely eat. Food turned to ash in her mouth. Her stomach churned constantly, tied into a painful knot. She avoided any part of the fortress where she might run into the commander. She took longer routes. She hid behind columns when she heard heavy footsteps approaching, because she didn't know what she would do if she saw him. If those amber eyes that haunted her dreams found hers. If he knows, he cannot know. He cannot. But the treacherous voice of reason whispered, what if he already does? On the third day, Sera was in the archives again. It was late morning, most people busy with daily duties. She was alone, as she always had been lately, kneeling on the floor, checking for the 1,000th time beneath the same table where she had been sitting that fateful morning. Nothing. Always nothing. Tears burned behind her eyes, not from sadness, but from furious frustration and fear that ate like acid. I am so stupid, so careless. I wrote all of that and just forgot it. How could I be so? At last, I found you. Sera froze completely. Every muscle, every nerve, every heartbeat simply stopped. She knew that voice. Deep, resonant. The voice that had made her shake the first time they spoke. No. Slowly, so slowly that every movement hurt, she rose from the floor, turned, and there, filling the archive's doorway exactly as he had 3 mornings before, stood Kael. But he looked different now. More present, sharper eyes, straighter posture, as if something inside him had awakened. And the way he looked at her made her heart kick dangerously. "Commander," she managed, her voice coming out surprisingly steady despite her nerves. "I was just searching," he finished, his lips curved faintly. "I know what you're searching for." Sera's stomach tightened. He knows. He has to know. I don't know what you mean," she lied badly. Kael walked slowly toward the shelves, fingers gliding along the spines of old texts. He seemed relaxed, but there was something in the way he moved. Deliberate, measured. "Found anything interesting lately?" he asked without looking at her. Sera's stomach clenched. Was it an innocent question, or did it have a second edge? "No, not really," she replied, trying to keep her voice normal. He picked up a random scroll and unrolled it. "That's a shame. Sometimes we find unexpected things in the most ordinary places." Unexpected things. Sera felt her face heat. Was he talking about the notebook, or only about archives? "I suppose so, Commander." Kael looked at her then, truly looked. His amber eyes studied her with an intensity that made Sera forget how to breathe. "Do you write?" he asked suddenly. Her heart stopped completely. Sometimes," she admitted, her mouth dry. "Nothing important." "I'm sure it's more important than you think," he said softly. "Words can reveal a great deal about the world, about people, about feelings we sometimes keep hidden." He knows. He has to know. But he could also be speaking in general, just making conversation. Sera couldn't be sure, and the uncertainty was torture. "Commander, I should." "Honest observations," he interrupted, turning his attention back to the scroll in his hands, "can be valuable, even when the writer believes no one else will ever see them." Sera's blood turned to ice. He was definitely implying something, but he still wasn't saying it outright. "Sometimes," she said in a shaky voice, "honesty can be dangerous. Or necessary." His eyes met hers again. "Especially when it wakes someone up to truths they would rather ignore." They stared at each other. The tension in the air was palpable. Fear, shame, and something deeper Sera couldn't name. Kael closed the scroll slowly and slid it back onto the shelf. Then he took one step toward her. "If you had lost something," he said in a low voice, almost casual, "something personal and important, would you like to know it was in safe hands?" Sera's eyes widened slightly. He has it. He really has the notebook. But he still didn't say it directly. I suppose so," she managed. He nodded, as if that answered a question he hadn't asked aloud. "Good." Before Sera could process what was happening, the door opened abruptly. A soldier, breathless, clearly agitated. "Commander, forgive the interruption, but Vice Commander Aldrich requests your presence immediately. He says it's urgent. Something about border security." Kael closed his eyes for a moment, jaw tightening visibly. When he opened them, frustration was plain. He looked at Sera for a long moment. "This conversation," he said, his voice heavy with something she couldn't identify, "is not over." Then, to Sera's complete astonishment, "Tomorrow. Will you have tea with me? In the East Gardens." It wasn't an order, but it wasn't exactly a casual request either. It was an invitation, leaving her a choice. Sera, confused, shaken, her face burning, heard her own voice. Yes. Something flickered in his eyes. Satisfaction, perhaps. Or relief. Good. And he left quickly with the soldier, leaving Sera standing there, completely lost. Did he read it? Did he not? Does he have the notebook? Was he only being polite? She didn't know, and the uncertainty was killing her. While Sera wrestled with torturous doubts, another drama unfolded in the fortress shadows. The staff member Aldrich had waited patiently until he was absolutely sure the commander was occupied. Then he entered the command quarters with the quick, efficient movements of someone who had done this before. He searched drawers, wardrobes, under the mattress, behind maps. He was about to give up when he noticed something strange. A wooden panel in the wall near the fireplace seemed slightly misaligned, as if it had been moved recently. He pressed, pushed, it opened, and inside, carefully hidden, was a small notebook with a worn leather cover. He picked it up with trembling hands and opened it. The handwriting was delicate, clearly feminine. He saw the name written small in the corner, Sera. He didn't recognize it, but Aldrich had paid for anything unusual in the commander's quarters. He tucked the notebook beneath his tunic and slipped out through the empty corridors. Aldrich was in his private quarters reviewing supply manifests when the staff member knocked discreetly. "Enter." The man stepped in, nervous but excited. "I found something in the commander's quarters, sir." "A notebook." Aldrich looked up, intrigued. "The commander's?" "No, sir. A woman's. Sera is written inside." Sera. The name was vaguely familiar. Some dependent, someone's daughter in the fortress. Why would the commander have a woman's notebook hidden away? He murmured more to himself than the staff member. But he took the book, dismissing the man with a few coins. Alone, he opened the first page and began to read. 5 minutes later, Aldrich was no longer sitting calmly. He was on his feet, the notebook clenched in hands that trembled, not with fear, but with barely contained fury mixed with something more dangerous. Opportunity. He had read everything. Every poisonous word. The accusations about him, traitor, diverted supplies, suspicious wagons, Mistress Kenna, the platinum and sapphire insignia pin. Details far too specific, far too dangerous. The girl obviously told the commander. How else would Kael have this notebook hidden in a secret compartment? That's why he changed. That's why he's questioning me. That wretched girl. Rage boiled in his veins, but Aldrich hadn't gotten where he was by being impulsive. And as he read again, he saw the opportunity shining between the lines of accusation. Because the notebook also brutalized the commander himself. Called him passive, manipulated, a puppet. Spoke of the territory's problems, their vulnerabilities. Conspiracy. Disrespect toward command. And those parts about watching the commander train, seeing him naked, her wolf howling for him, proof of sick obsession. Perhaps even forbidden magic. Witches used obsession to control alphas. Everyone knew that. Perfect. Aldrich sat down again, his mind working at calculated speed. He would make a public announcement. He would search for the notebook's owner. He would force Kael to take action against someone conspiring against command. If his commander tried to defend her, it would prove he was compromised, enchanted. The officers would demand action, and Aldrich would finally have the total control he'd always wanted. He smiled. "Thank you, little Sera, for giving me exactly what I needed." Chapter 5. The Accusation. The next morning, Sera woke to shouting outside. She sprang up, her heart already racing on pure instinct, and opened the door to her small room. Guards were running through the corridors. Staff members whispered nervously in frightened clusters. "What happened?" she asked a kitchen worker hurrying past. "A command announcement, girl. In the main courtyard. Everyone must attend immediately." Sera dressed in haste, trembling fingers fighting the ties of her simple dress, and hurried down the stone stairs. The main courtyard was packed. Guards, staff, officers, merchants, all staring at the raised platform where the commander normally made proclamations. But it was not the commander standing there. It was Aldrich. Sera's stomach dropped painfully. "Good people of the fortress," Aldrich began, his voice loud and authoritative as it echoed off the stone walls. "I come to you with a matter of extreme gravity that affects the safety of all of us." He held something up high. Small, leather cover. "No, no." Sera's world stopped turning. "This notebook," Aldrich continued, his voice hardening, "was found containing serious and unfounded accusations against command. Conspiracy, direct disrespect to the commander, deliberate attempts to sow discord and distrust in our territories. My notebook. He has my notebook." Sera could not breathe, could not move. She could only stand there, frozen, watching her world collapse. "Whoever wrote this," Aldrich's voice turned to pure threat, "has committed treason against our territories and against our commander, and must be punished according to the severity of the crime." Murmurs erupted through the crowd. Fear, curiosity, outrage. "Therefore," he continued, raising his voice over the din, We seek the owner of this notebook. And no one will leave the fortress until we discover who is responsible for these slanders against command. Sera's legs buckled. She grabbed a stone column to keep from collapsing in front of everyone. How did he find it? And then, with painful, inevitable clarity, the only conclusion possible. The commander. He showed his vice commander. The logic was simple and devastating. Kael had the notebook. He had all but admitted it yesterday in the archives. Now Aldrich had it. Therefore, Kael had given it to him. Everything in the archives, the subtle words loaded with meaning, the invitation to tea, those intense looks, had been a lie. Cruel manipulation. He had read her deepest shames and handed her to his vice commander to be destroyed in public. Tears burned behind her eyes, but Sera forced them back with every ounce of strength she had. Not here. Not in front of hundreds of people. She turned and ran, ignoring the curious looks that followed her. In the command quarters, Kael was preparing for tea with Sera when he heard the shouting from the courtyard. He rushed to the tall window. He saw the gathered crowd. He saw Aldrich on the raised platform, gesturing dramatically. He saw the notebook, that small notebook with the worn leather cover, in his vice commander's hand. Kael's blood turned to ice. No. He dressed in seconds, no care now, only speed, and ran through the corridors. He found Aldrich still in the courtyard, dispersing the crowd with authoritarian orders. What do you think you're doing? Kael snarled, not caring who heard. Fury spilled from every word. Aldrich turned, and for a fraction of a second, genuine surprise crossed his face before it was quickly replaced by carefully constructed false concern. Commander, how fortunate you came. We found this notebook with absolutely terrible accusations against you and against. Where did you get that? Kael's voice was low, lethal, dangerous. Aldrich held the notebook with excessive care, meeting Kael's eyes with perfectly practiced concern. It was found in the storage rooms, he said in a carefully measured tone. Apparently, someone dropped it. A staff member, alarmed by the grave content, naturally brought it to me at once. In the storage rooms, Kael felt fury flare hotter. His vice commander was lying to his face. Boldly. Because they both of them knew, that the notebook had been hidden in a secret compartment in the commander's quarters. Aldrich had ordered a search, ordered it stolen. But Kael could not accuse him without admitting he had possessed a notebook containing conspiracies against command. And Aldrich could not admit he had searched the command quarters without orders, without confessing to spying and violation of authority. So there they stood, staring at each other, both knowing the truth, both unable to say it out loud. A silent, lethal chess match. In the storage rooms, Kael repeated, his voice dangerously soft. Every word laden with meaning that everyone around them missed. But Aldrich understood perfectly. How convenient, is it not? Aldrich smiled, thin and cold. How fortunate we found it first. You had no right, Kael said, taking a threatening step forward, to make a public announcement without my explicit permission, regardless of where it was found. The emphasis made Aldrich's eyes narrow briefly. But surely you see the gravity of what is written here, his vice commander argued, changing tactics. Conspiracy against command, accusations against officers of the council, direct disrespect to you. I was protecting your interests. Protecting? They both knew it was a lie. It is a notebook, Kael cut in, his voice echoing through the courtyard. Personal opinions. Private thoughts. Thoughts that affront command, Aldrich insisted. That must be punished appropriately. Kael stepped closer, his eyes flaring golden for a brief second. A tense silence fell between them. Aldrich retreated slightly, instinct recognizing the alpha challenge even as his mind tried to maintain control. They stared at each other. A silent game of strategy. Kael snatched the notebook from his vice commander's hands. I will handle this personally. He turned and left before Aldrich could argue further, but the damage was already done. Sera had heard the announcement, and she would surely believe he had betrayed her. In her modest room, Sera wept. Not loud sobs, but silent tears that burned, fed by rage, fear, and pain. Sera. Her aunt entered, deep worry etched into her weathered face. The announcement. That notebook. It's mine, Aunt Myra, she managed through tears. It's mine. She watched her aunt's face drain of color. What did you write, my girl? Truths, she cried, her voice breaking. About Aldrich stealing from the territories, about manipulating the commander, about supplies that never arrive. She stopped, shame blazing, and personal things. About the commander. Things I never should have written. Myra pulled her into a tight embrace. How did Aldrich get it? And then came the devastating conclusion. The only possible logic. The commander. Sera pulled back, looking at her aunt with red, desperate eyes as she told her everything. He found my notebook and gave it to his vice-commander. You cannot be certain. I can, she shouted, pain turning into fury. He read it all and handed me to Aldrich like I was nothing. Like it was some cruel game. The tears surged again. How was I so stupid? I thought he was different. That he was better than this. But he's just as bad as Aldrich. Worse, because he pretended to care. Myra cupped her niece's face in her calloused hands. Then we're getting you out of here. What? I know every secret passage in this fortress, Myra said with iron determination. 30 years of kitchen service taught me things. You have a cousin in the eastern settlements. We'll go to her. Just until things calm down. If they find out you helped me. Leave that to me, she said firmly. We'll wait until nightfall. Kael discreetly summoned his most trusted scout. I need you to find someone for me, he said in a low voice. Sera, niece of kitchen worker Myra. Find her before Aldrich does. Help her hide. Protect her. His wolf was frantic, howling inside him with urgent need. Commander, the scout hesitated. Vice-Commander Aldrich ordered an active search. He wants to find her first. Then be faster than he is, Kael said, his eyes flaring golden. She cannot fall into his hands. Do you understand? Protect her no matter what it costs. The scout nodded and left quickly. Kael remained alone, holding the notebook. Please, Sera. Trust me, just a little longer. At dusk, Myra led Sera through narrow corridors, ancient, forgotten passages built for escapes during the territorial wars. During the guard shift change, exactly when she knew there would be a 3-minute gap, they slipped out through a hidden side door beneath creeping vines. Sera's last sight was the fortress towers against the darkening sky. Kael's trusted scout arrived at Myra's quarters moments too late. Empty. He ran back to the commander, breathless. Commander, they fled. Myra and her niece. Gone. Kael felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. No. Sera. No. A guard loyal to Aldrich had come with word of the escape minutes earlier. Aldrich was furious. Absolutely furious. How? How did she get out? One of the kitchen workers helped her, sir. Myra. Aldrich smiled. That dangerous smile. Arrest Myra immediately. Treason. Helping a conspirator flee. A calculated pause. And send guards after the girl. I want her back alive. As soon as dawn broke, Sera was found in one of the villages she frequented, where she had thought she could find temporary refuge with a sympathetic family. Aldrich's guards surrounded her and dragged her back to the fortress like a criminal. Kael learned from his own guards that Sera had been captured and that Myra was imprisoned in the holding cells by Aldrich's order. The fury that exploded inside him was unlike anything he'd ever felt. Cold, lethal, controlled. He gathered his personal guard, soldiers loyal only to him. Get Myra out of the holding cells now. And bring Sera. Put them both in quarters near mine, under my personal protection. The guards rushed to obey. Aldrich discovered it minutes later. He stormed into the command quarters without knocking, furious. What do you think you're doing? This is obstruction of the investigation. I arrested them lawfully. Kael turned slowly, and for the first time in his life, he let the true alpha rise fully to the surface. His physical presence had always been imposing, but now there was real power. Authority that did not accept challenge. He stepped toward his vice-commander. Aldrich backed up instinctively. Who is commander here? Kael's voice was low, soft, absolutely lethal. His eyes burned with intense gold, eyes of the massive silver wolf. You. Aldrich tried, but the word came out strangled. Meh, Kael confirmed, taking another step. So stop acting as if it is you. One more step. Aldrich hit the wall. You will do nothing to them, the commander said, every word carrying absolute command. You will not touch them. You will not go near them. Not until I decide what is to be done. Is that clear? Aldrich tried to argue, but the power pouring off Kael was crushing. All, the commander continued, his voice soft but infinitely threatening. Do I need to remind you who wears the command insignia here? No, Aldrich managed, humiliation burning in his eyes. Good. Now leave. Aldrich walked away from that confrontation shattered, humiliated, and absolutely furious. That girl had changed everything. Turned his weak commander into something dangerous. Chapter 6. Poison and Plots. Aldrich left that confrontation with his commander shaking, not with fear, but with a rage so intense he could barely breathe. The commander had never spoken to him like that. Never displayed that kind of raw power, that alpha authority that had made Aldrich instinctively retreat like a cornered animal. The girl. Everything had changed because of her. That insignificant dependent had turned his weak, malleable commander into something dangerous, into a real leader. And that could not be allowed to continue. Aldrich locked himself in his quarters, his mind working with the calculated precision of decades spent manipulating people and situations. The original plan, to use the notebook to incriminate her, to force Kael to punish her, had failed. The commander had protected her, placed her under his personal guard, openly defying Aldrich. But there were other ways, more subtle ways, more lethal ways. He had already planted the seed when he made the public announcement. Those passages about obsession, about her wolf howling for him, that proved forbidden magic. Enchantment. Now he merely needed to water that seed with carefully cultivated rumors. And if that wasn't enough, well, poisons were difficult to trace. And a dead commander could not protect anyone. Aldrich worked with the silent efficiency of a serpent. He sought out specific members of the officer council, the older ones, the more traditional, the more superstitious men who valued bloodlines and distrusted anything that smelled of magic. "Have you noticed how our commander has been different?" he whispered in private conversations, his tone heavy with false concern. "Since that girl appeared." "Different how?" Councillor Thane would ask, leaning in. "Obsessive." Aldrich let the word hang in the air. He never showed interest in any woman. Years of refusing officers daughters of impeccable lineage. And suddenly, some dependent with no name, no standing, and he protects her as if, a calculated pause, as if he had no choice. He watched understanding and suspicion grow in the other man's eyes. "You're suggesting?" "I'm suggesting nothing." Aldrich raised his hands in feigned innocence. "Only observing facts." His behavior changed radically. He confronted me because of her and that notebook. He didn't need to say more. The seed was planted. He repeated variations of this conversation with 5 influential council members over the course of 2 days. Always careful, always insinuating, never accusing outright. And he watched as distrust spread like a silent disease among the officers. Kael knew Aldrich was plotting something. He could feel it in the looks council members gave him, cautious, almost fearful, in conversations that stopped abruptly when he approached. But he had more urgent concerns. Sera. She was only a few chambers away, under his protection, yet might as well have been on the far side of the territories for the emotional distance between them. His wolf was restless, howling constantly. "Go to her. Explain. Make her understand. She is ours." For 2 days, Kael hesitated, gathering courage, rehearsing words, trying to find the right way to explain. But in the end, he knew there was no right way. Only the truth. On the 3rd day, he knocked on her door. Sera was sitting near the window when she heard the knock. Her heart leapt immediately. In recent days, she'd been confined to that luxurious room. Far more luxurious than anywhere she'd ever lived, yet still a gilded prison. Her aunt was in adjacent quarters, equally protected. Or watched. She no longer knew which. Guards loyal to the commander brought food, made sure she had everything she needed, but no one explained anything. No one said what would happen next. "Come in," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. The door opened, and there he was. Kael filled the doorway exactly as he had in the archives. Tall, imposing, impossible to ignore. But there was something different in his expression now. Something vulnerable she'd never seen before. "Commander." Sera rose quickly, keeping her distance. She didn't know whether to feel anger, shame, or fear. Perhaps all 3. "Sera," he said softly, closing the door behind him. "We need to talk." She didn't respond. She simply stood there, arms crossed defensively over her chest. Kael took a few steps into the room, then stopped when he saw her stiffen. "First," he began, his voice laden with emotion he seemed to be struggling to control, "I need you to know the truth about the notebook." Sera felt her face flush immediately with shame. "I was not the one who showed it to Aldrich," Kael continued, his eyes meeting hers with intensity. "He ordered my quarters searched. He stole the notebook from a secret compartment." She blinked, processing. "I would never Never betray you like that, he said, taking another careful step. When I read your words, yes, I read them, and I know I shouldn't have, but I did. I was changed by them. I didn't want to hurt you. I wanted to protect you. Something tightened painfully in Sera's chest. Then how did Aldrich? He suspected I was investigating him, Kael explained. He sent spies everywhere. They found the notebook hidden and took it to him. It made sense. Terrible, logical sense. I'm sorry, Kael said, and there was genuine pain in his voice. I'm sorry for letting things reach this point. For not protecting you better. For not seeing what Aldrich was sooner. The fault is mine. Silence fell between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. Sera didn't know what to say. All the furious words she'd practiced over the past days died in her throat. Because he seemed sincere. Truly remorseful. The things you wrote in the notebook, Kael continued after a moment, his voice lower now, almost hesitant. About me. About feelings. Were they real? Sera's face burned so fiercely she was certain she was red to the roots of her hair. All those shameful confessions. Watching him train. Seeing him naked. Imagining things. Her wolf howling for him. And he was asking if they were real. They are just. Her voice came out hoarse. She cleared her throat. Foolish things, Commander. Silly fantasies of a girl who doesn't know her place. She saw something change in his expression. His eyes lost some of their light. His jaw tightened. What a shame, he said softly, with genuine sadness that made her chest ache. Because I very much wish they were true. And before Sera could process it, before she could respond, he turned and left. The door closed with a soft sound. Sera stood there, staring at the wooden door, completely lost. He wished they were true. What does that mean? She sank slowly into the chair by the window, her mind spinning in confused circles. Kael left Sera's quarters with a heart heavy as stone. She had denied it, said they were foolish fantasies. His wolf howled in pain inside him. No, she is ours. She feels it too. We know she does. But if she didn't want to admit it, if she was too ashamed or too afraid, Kael would not force her. He would never do that. But he could do one thing, something he should have done long ago. Free the territories from the man who had poisoned them for years. In the days that followed, Kael worked methodically. He gathered all the scouts he had sent to investigate, compiled every report, every testimony, every document. Mistress Kenna from the border villages confirmed everything. The medical supplies never arrived. Other families as well, names, dates, promised quantities versus what they actually received. The scouts traced the wagons, followed them to merchant contacts, found traders willing to testify, for a price, of course, but testify nonetheless. Aldrich had been selling the territory's resources for personal profit. Financial records showed glaring discrepancies. Funds approved versus funds distributed. The difference always vanishing into administrative costs overseen by Aldrich. Letters. Compromising correspondence. Plans to eventually assume more authority, perhaps even command itself. It was all there. Years of systematic betrayal documented in irrefutable detail. And Kael had obtained it all because Sera had given him the right places to look, the right people to question, thanks to her notebook. Without her, he would have remained blind. He convened a formal session of the full officer council, all members without exception. Aldrich arrived confident, that satisfied smile on his lips. Clearly, he believed his rumors had worked, that the council stood with him. Kael waited until everyone was seated. Then he began. Members of the council, he said, his voice resonating through the chamber with an authority he'd never used before. I have called this session to present evidence of treason against our territories. Murmurs erupted. Aldrich kept his expression neutral, but Kael saw his eyes narrow slightly. For weeks, Kael continued, I received information through an unexpected source, a notebook written by someone who observed the territories with eyes sharper than my own. He paused, letting the words linger. That notebook contained specific observations about diverted resources, supplies that never reached the villages, equipment that disappeared. And it pointed to one person. My vice commander, Aldrich. This is absurd, Aldrich stood. That notebook is full of lies, of conspiracies against you. Sit down, Kael ordered, his voice cutting like a blade. His eyes flashed golden briefly. Aldrich sat slowly, something faltering in his confidence. I could have ignored it, Kael continued calmly. I could have dismissed it. But something told me to investigate, to truly see for the first time. He gestured to the guards, who began distributing documents to each council member. Here are the results of that investigation. Testimonies from residents of the border villages about supplies that never arrived. Records of wagons leaving Aldrich's private warehouses. Evidence of those resources being sold to merchants. Another gesture. More documents. Here are comparisons between resources approved by me and resources actually distributed. The discrepancies are significant. Aldrich was pale now. And here, Kael placed a stack of letters on the table. Correspondence. Plans. Discussions about expanding influence, about eventually assuming greater control of command. Absolute silence fell over the chamber. All of this, Kael said, his voice low but lethal, I obtained in less than 2 weeks. Even with my vice commander's spies everywhere, even with him trying to manipulate me for years. Because someone finally showed me where to look. He looked directly at Aldrich. The girl you tried to destroy saved me. Saved these territories with her honest, courageous observations. One of the oldest counselors cleared his throat. Commander, this evidence is extensive. It's irrefutable, Kael corrected. This is a lie, Aldrich finally exploded. You're enchanted by her. Can't you see? She used forbidden magic to control you. That's why you act so differently. Enough. The word thundered through the chamber. Kael rose, and alpha power radiated from him in waves. Everyone felt it, the pressure in the air, the weight of true authority. For years, he said, his voice low but heavy with power, you manipulated me, made me doubt my own instincts, controlled me like a puppet. And when I finally woke, when I finally saw the truth, you accused me of being enchanted. He took a step toward his vice commander. The only manipulation here was yours. Years of poisoning my mind against trusting myself. His eyes glowed fully golden now. Aldrich, Kael said, and there was finality in the name. You are found guilty of high treason, of conspiracy against command, of systematic theft of territorial resources, of manipulation and abuse of authority. The entire chamber held its breath. And as commander, Kael continued, his voice ringing with absolute command, exercising full authority as alpha of these territories, I banish you forever. You have until dawn to leave these lands. If you are found here after sunrise, you will be executed for treason. Aldrich was livid, shaking with impotent fury. You will regret this, he hissed. When that which destroys you, when? Guards. Kael didn't look at him. Escort him out. Ensure he is beyond the borders before dawn. 2 loyal guards seized Aldrich by the arms. He struggled, shouting accusations and threats, but was dragged out nonetheless. The doors closed, silencing his screams. Kael turned to the council. As for the young woman Sera and her Aunt Myra, he said calmly, they are fully absolved of any accusation. The notebook contained honest, personal opinions, not conspiracy. And thanks to those observations, we uncovered real treason. He looked at each council member. Does anyone object? Silence. No hands were raised. Good. This session is adjourned. Chapter 7. Truth and Tea. Sera learned from the guards that Aldrich had been banished, that she and her aunt were completely free, that it was over. She sank heavily onto the bed, trying to process it. It was over. Truly over. She should have felt relief. And she did. But there was something else too. Something confusing and complicated. A few days passed. Sera remained in the fortress. The commander insisted on keeping her and her aunt for safety, and though he didn't say it aloud, for convenience as well. Kael was busier than ever. He reorganized the council, secured fragile alliances, corrected courses that had been neglected for far too long. Even so, amid the decisions of the territories, he began to ask for Sera's opinion. Always with respect, always as commander, never as anything more than that. For Sera, however, every meeting was a silent battle. Her heart rebelled every time she saw him. The bond contained pulsed like a low, insistent flame, demanding more than she was ready to give, until a soft knock at the door made her rise. Come in. It was a guard. Miss Sera, he said respectfully. The commander requests your presence in the East Gardens, if you are willing. Sera hesitated only a moment. I'll be there shortly. The garden was bathed in the soft light of afternoon. The scent of flowers filled the air, jasmine, roses, lavender. Sera walked slowly along the stone path, her heart racing with every step. And then she saw him. Kael stood near the central fountain, watching the water. Tall, strong, but there was something different about him now. Something lighter, as if an ancient weight had finally been lifted from his shoulders. He turned when he heard her approach and smiled. Small, restrained, but genuine. "Sera," he said softly. "Thank you for coming." She nodded, unsure what to say. "And by the way," he continued, "you were right, you know, about everything you wrote. I wasted my strength, ignored the people, let Aldrich manipulate me. But you woke me." He took another step. "I want to thank you publicly before the council. I already did, but I wanted to thank you here as well. Personally." "You don't need to." "I do," he interrupted gently, "because there's something else I need to tell you." Sera's heart raced. Kael took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "I spent years," he began, his voice laden with emotion, refusing to choose a second in command. "The council pressured me constantly, presented candidates of noble military lineage, organized formal meetings. And I always said, later, when the territories are stable, when I have solved the problems." He laughed without humor. "I thought partnership was a distraction from what truly mattered, leading well. That choosing a companion was secondary, frivolous." He took another step, standing very close now. "But the territories never improved, and I didn't understand why until I read your words." His eyes met hers with an intensity that stole the air from Sera's lungs. "You see, Sera. You see what I refuse to see. You see the people, the real problems, the true solutions. You wouldn't be a distraction from the territories. You would be the partner I needed and never knew how to seek." His voice grew softer, more intimate. "I never thought I would want a woman to love me this much. I never felt it before for anyone. But you." He stopped, the intensity in his eyes making Sera tremble. "I fell in love with the things you wrote. With your brutal honesty that woke me. With your sharp intelligence that saw through lies. With your genuine care for people, even while possessing more wisdom than my entire council." Kael took the final step, so close that Sera could feel his warmth. "You see the world, see people in a way I never could. You would make the territories better. You would make me better." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I went mad for you, Sera. My wolf and I. Since that morning in the archives, something changed. And the more I came to know you through your words, the more certain I became." He took her hand gently. "My wolf recognized you, and that certainty grew with every moment. With every word of yours I read. With every thought of you." His eyes flashed golden briefly. "And now I have no doubts. You are my destined mate." Sera's eyes widened, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain he could hear it. "Your notebook told me a secret." Kael smiled faintly. "Your wolf knew too, didn't it? Even as you fought it, it howled for me." She blushed deeply, unable to deny it. "It was true." "Sera," he said softly, "these days I tried to occupy my mind with the territories, with duties, with decisions." He looked at her with raw honesty. "But I couldn't stop thinking about you. I need to know if it's real. So I'll ask again, and please, please be honest with me." He held her face between his hands with infinite care. "The feelings you wrote about, are they real?" Tears burned behind Sera's eyes. And this time she didn't lie. "Yes," she whispered. "They always were. I've always been in love with you. Not only with the handsome man I watched train from afar, but with what you could be, with what I saw existed in you, hidden beneath manipulation." The tears finally fell. "But you're the commander, and I'm just Sera. A dependent, nothing more than that." "You're everything," Kael said with fierce intensity. "Everything I need. Everything the territories need." And then he asked, "Shall we finally have that tea I promised?" Sera laughed through her tears and nodded. They sat at a small table in the garden. Tea was served by discreet staff who soon vanished, leaving them alone. They talked, truly talked, for the first time. Without secrets, without misunderstandings, without masks. Just Kael and Sera. He spoke of growing up under Aldrich's shadow, always doubting himself, of never feeling attraction to anyone until her. She spoke of growing up without a mother, of observing the territories and seeing injustice, of fighting her own wolf that insisted on recognizing something in him. And the more they talked, the closer they became. Chairs drawing nearer, almost imperceptibly. Hands touching across the table. First by accident, then deliberately. Fingers intertwining. Kael could barely focus on what she was saying. His eyes kept drifting to her mouth. The way her lips moved, how she bit her lower lip when she hesitated, how she smiled when she spoke of something that amused her. "She is beautiful," as I've never seen before. Until there was no space left between them. Sera was in the middle of a sentence, something about the village, about Mistress Kenna, when she realized Kael was no longer listening. He was staring at her mouth with an intensity that stole the air from her lungs. His eyes darkened, amber turning nearly black with only a golden ring around them. And then, without asking permission, without warning, he simply leaned in and kissed her. Stole the kiss as if it had always belonged to him. For a fraction of a second, Sera froze in surprise. Then she melted. His lips were softer than she'd imagined, warmer, more perfect. The kiss began almost gentle, as if he were holding back. But when Sera responded, when her hands moved instinctively to his chest, something broke completely. Kael deepened the kiss with a low groan, one hand sliding to the back of her neck, fingers burying in her hair. The other hand settled at her waist, pulling her closer. Sera didn't think. She simply felt. Years of watching him from afar. Years of denying what she felt. Years of fighting her own wolf that insisted on recognizing him. All of it exploded in that kiss. Her hands slid up his chest, feeling the defined muscles beneath his uniform, to his shoulders, then his neck, pulling him even closer. It's not enough. It will never be enough. When they finally parted, only because they needed air, both were trembling. Kael rested his forehead against hers, eyes still closed, breath uneven. "I'm sorry," he said hoarsely. "I didn't ask permission. But you were speaking and I could only look at your mouth, Anne." "Don't apologize," Sera interrupted, equally breathless. "Never apologize for that." He opened his eyes and met hers. And what Sera saw there, desire, yes, but also love, adoration, certainty, made her heart overflow. "Sera," he said, his voice rough with emotion. He stopped, took a deep breath. Then he stepped back slightly, rising from his chair. And to Sera's complete astonishment, he knelt there in the garden. The commander, tall, strong, powerful, kneeling in the grass before her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. He drew a ring from his pocket, simple, elegant, perfect, silver with a small lavender stone. "I know this seems mad," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "Rushed, too fast. I've barely known you for weeks, and here I am on my knees, asking for your hand." He held her hand between his, as if it was something fragile and priceless. "But Sera, I've never been certain of anything in my life as I am of you. Of us. I've never felt this. Never known what it was to have absolute certainty about another person." His eyes shone, golden. "I spent my entire life thinking I didn't need anyone. That a partner would be only an obligation." His voice grew more intense. "And then I met you. Read your words. Saw the world through your eyes. And I realized I was completely wrong. Because you are everything I didn't know I needed. Everything the territories need. Everything I need to be the man, the leader, I was always meant to be." He squeezed her hand more tightly. "I don't care about lineage. I don't care what the council thinks. I will not, imagine anyone by my side but you. When I try to picture the future, you are there. Always. In every vision, every plan, every dream." A tear finally slipped free, trailing down his cheek. "And I know this seems rushed. I know I should wait, get to know you better, court you properly. But Sera," his voice broke slightly, "I love you. I love you in a way I've never loved anyone. I didn't even know I could love like this. Beyond my father, I've never loved anyone in my life. And now I cannot imagine a day without you. I cannot imagine not loving you." He cupped her face with his free hand, his thumb wiping away a falling tear. "I know I love you. I'm absolutely certain of it. And I know with every fiber of my being, with every beat of my heart, with every breath, that I will never stop. I will never stop loving you. Not in 100 years. Not in 1,000. Not when we're old and gray. Never." He lifted the ring, holding it between them. "So yes, this is too fast by any normal measure. But there's nothing normal about what I feel for you. About what we are together." He smiled through his tears. "I'm proposing to the woman who called me a passive puppet in her notebook. A woman who saw all my flaws and still her wolf howled for me." He was vulnerable in a way commanders never should be. "I want to marry you, Sera. I want to claim you as my mate before the entire territory. I want you to be my partner, my counselor, my equal in absolutely everything." His eyes burned intensely now, wolf gold mixed with overwhelming human emotion. "I want to run with you beneath the moon as wolves. I want to lead beside you as equals. I want to wake every day seeing the world through your eyes, learning to be better because you show me how. I want to build the territories you always knew we could have. Together. He held her hand, the ring ready. I want to spend every day of the rest of my life loving you, protecting you, honoring you, being worthy of you. His voice dropped to a fierce whisper. So Sera, daughter of Marin, the woman who saved me without even realizing it. The woman my wolf recognized before I understood what was happening. The woman I love more than I ever thought possible to love anyone. He stopped, his eyes locking onto hers with absolute intensity. Will you marry me? Sera could not stop crying. Tears streamed freely down her face, but they were tears of happiness so pure it hurt. Yes, she managed, her voice trembling but firm. Yes, always. Yes. She paused, laughing through her tears. Yes, Kael. I will marry you. Kael smiled, understanding, and slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. And then it happened. The moment the ring touched her skin, the moment she said yes with her whole heart, something changed. Both their eyes flared golden simultaneously. Intense, absolute, unmistakable. Sera felt as if something inside her, something that had always been waiting, searching, finally clicked into place. Like two pieces of a puzzle fitting perfectly together. The bond. It was no longer growing attraction or gradual recognition. It was absolute certainty. Her wolf howled inside her, not with restlessness, but with pure joy. My mate. My alpha. Mine alone. And she knew with every fiber of her being, that Kael's wolf answered the same way. She could feel it. The connection between them like a strong golden thread. She could feel his emotions, love, joy, relief, protective possessiveness. And he could feel hers. They stood there, gazing at one another with eyes glowing golden in the afternoon light. The soul bond, finally completely sealed. My mate, Kael whispered, his voice filled with reverence. My alpha, Sera replied. And then he pulled her into another kiss, deeper, more intense, sealing with their lips what the bond had already sealed in their souls. Under the golden light of the setting sun, witnessed only by flowers and sky, something new began. A commander who finally saw his territories. A mate who had always seen the truth. And a love that was, at last, inevitable. Chapter 8. Silver and Lavender. That night, two wolves ran through the forest bordering the territories. One immense silver wolf, powerful alpha, just as large and magnificent as Sera had always watched from afar, hidden in her tower. Beside him, a smaller but equally fierce she-wolf, grey with lavender-tinted markings along her spine, finally running free at his side. They ran side by side beneath the full moon, free, wild, complete. And Sera remembered the words she'd written in that notebook. Confused, frustrated words filled with a desire she didn't understand. And when he transforms into a wolf, something in me, my own wolf, wants to approach, wants to touch that silver fur, wants to run beside him. Now she ran, not watching from afar with a broken heart, not fighting what she felt, but free at his side, as it was always meant to be. The silver wolf turned his head, amber eyes meeting hers for a moment, and even in animal form, she could feel through the bond, love, joy, wholeness. He slowed, waiting for her to catch up, then touched his muzzle to hers. A gentle, intimate gesture. My mate. My love. She answered by brushing against the silver fur she'd always wanted to touch, running circles around him in pure joy. And Sera, running beside her alpha, finally understood why her wolf had always howled for him. It wasn't weakness. It wasn't betrayal of her rational mind. It was recognition. Inevitable, destined, true. 3 months later, the fortress was transformed. The main courtyard, usually reserved for military demonstrations and formal ceremonies, had been decorated with thousands of flowers, lavender and silver ribbons woven through the stone columns, creating an archway that gleamed in the afternoon sun. Every member of the territories who could travel had come. Border villagers, fortress staff, soldiers, council members, all gathered to witness something unprecedented. A commander taking a mate of no military lineage. A dependent becoming an equal partner in leadership. Sera stood in the preparation chamber, her Aunt Myra fussing with the simple but elegant dress they'd chosen. Cream-colored silk with lavender embroidery along the hem, silver thread woven through her hair. You're shaking, Myra said softly, squeezing her niece's hands. I know, Sera laughed, tears already threatening. I can't help it. He loves you, her aunt said firmly. Anyone can see it. The way he looks at you, as if you hung the moon itself. Sera smiled, feeling the bond pulse with warmth. She could sense Kael in the courtyard, feel his anticipation, his joy, his absolute certainty. "I'm here," she sent through the bond, still marveling at the ability. "I'm waiting," came his response, filled with such love it made her chest ache. The ceremony was simple but profound. Kael stood at the center of the courtyard in full formal uniform, silver and white, the colors of his wolf, with the command insignia gleaming at his shoulder. When Sera appeared at the archway entrance, his breath caught audibly. She walked slowly down the aisle, not with her head down in subservience, but with her chin high, meeting his gaze with equal strength. Because that was what they were. Equals. The fortress chaplain spoke the traditional words, but Kael barely heard them. He could only see Sera, beautiful, brilliant, brave Sera, walking toward him as if she'd been doing it her entire life. When she reached him, he took her hands, and the bond flared golden between them, visible to everyone present as their eyes glowed simultaneously. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Soul bonds were rare, sacred, unmistakable. "Do you, Kael, commander of these territories, take Sera as your mate, your partner, your equal in all things?" the chaplain asked. "I do," Kael said, his voice ringing clear. "With everything I am and everything I will be." "Do you, Sera, take Kael as your mate, your partner, your equal in all things?" "I do," Sera replied, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "With everything I am and everything I will be. Then by the authority vested in me and witnessed by these territories, I declare you bonded mates. What the wolf recognizes, let no one separate." Kael pulled Sera into a kiss that was both tender and claiming, and the crowd erupted in cheers. The celebration lasted long into the night. Music filled the courtyard. Food and drink flowed freely. But the most remarkable thing was watching the commander and his new mate move through the crowd together. Not with him leading and her following, but side by side. They stopped to speak with Mistress Kenna, who had traveled from the border village specifically for the ceremony. "Thank you," the old healer said, gripping Sera's hands. "The new supply distributions, they are actually arriving now. My people can finally breathe." "Thank you," Sera replied, "for trusting me with the truth." They spoke with council members, with soldiers, with staff, and everyone could see it. The way Kael looked at Sera when she spoke, how he valued her opinions, how he never made a decision without consulting her. The territories had not just gained a commander's mate. They'd gained a true leader's partner. Late that night, after the celebrations had finally wound down, Kael and Sera stood on the command tower balcony, looking out over the sleeping fortress. "Do you regret it?" Kael asked softly, pulling her back against his chest. "Marrying someone who didn't see the truth until you forced him to?" "Never," Sera replied, turning in his arms to face him. "You saw it when it mattered. That's what counts." She smiled mischievously. "Besides, I got to marry the man I used to spy on during training. That's a fantasy fulfilled." Kael laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. "I still can't believe you watched me like that." "I still can't believe you read my notebook," she countered. "Fair point." He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips, soft and sweet. "I have something for you," he said, pulling back slightly. He retrieved a leather-bound book from inside his jacket. New, pristine, with silver edging. "What's this?" "A new notebook," Kael said. "For new observations, new truths, new dreams." He opened it to the first page, where he'd written in his bold script. "For Sera, who sees what others miss, who speaks what others fear, who loves what others overlook. May you never stop writing the truth. May you never stop showing me how to be better. May you never stop being exactly who you are. Forever yours, Kael." Sera's eyes filled with tears again. "You're going to make me cry on our bonding night." "Then I'm doing something right," he murmured, kissing away her tears. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, feeling the bond pulse between them like a heartbeat. Two souls who had found each other in the most unexpected way. Through honesty written in secret. Through courage to see the truth. Through love that refused to be denied. 5 years later, the territories thrived. Under joint leadership, corruption had been rooted out. Supply lines ran efficiently. Border villages prospered. The council now included representatives from civilian populations, ensuring every voice was heard. And in the private gardens of the fortress, where lavender grew wild and silver ribbons still hung from that first bonding ceremony, two wolves often ran together beneath the moon. Sometimes they were joined by two smaller wolves, pups with their mother's intelligence and their father's strength, lavender gray fur marked with silver streaks. The next generation, already learning to see the world with clear eyes. Already learning that true strength came not from power alone, but from partnership, from honesty, from love. And in a locked drawer in Sera's study, two notebooks rested side by side. The old one, worn, water-stained, filled with observations that had changed everything. And the new one, now equally full, documenting the building of something better, something true. Some bonds are written in the stars long before they are understood. Some loves begin as irritation because they are too powerful to be denied. And some leaders are born not of bloodlines, but of hearts brave enough to write the truth, even when no one else dares to see it. Beneath the moon that witnessed their bond, beneath the stars shining over the territories they now protected together, two wolves ran. And the territories, at last, were at peace. The end.